celebrating the 50th anniversary of one of our favorite presses, White Pine Press. We have a really fantastic lineup of writers for you. We'll get to them in just a second, but before we get started, I wanted to say a few words about Beyond Baroque. I wanted to start by acknowledging Beyond Baroque's presence on traditional and ancestral and unceded territories of the Tongva peoples. We acknowledge the wrong done to these peoples through settler colonialism, genocidal practices, and the violent dispossession of their land. And as an arts organization, Beyond Baroque is committed to uplifting indigenous communities, writers, their stories, and their art. This is an anniversary for Beyond Baroque as well. This is our 55th anniversary. Which is very exciting. And we have existed from the very beginning to support poets and writers and artists and pretty much anyone who's exploring the artistic possibilities of language. We've done that for 55 years through our workshops. We have free workshops, our Monday night fiction workshop, our Wednesday night poetry workshop. We have paid workshops as well, all kinds of seminars, classes, etc., to help develop writers at all stages of their careers. We also have a reading and performance series, which takes place pretty much every weekend right here in this theater. We have about 100 events a year, mostly poetry, some fiction, some other sorts of things, film, music, performance art, etc., etc. And we have an art gallery, the Mike Kelly Gallery. There'll be a new show coming up. The preview of it will be next Sunday. It's a show focused on the loss of affordable housing in Venice, exploring the illegal evictions under the Ellis Act and all sorts of other ways in which landlords have evicted folks in affordable housing. So I encourage you to come back and check that out. In terms of our readings and performances, we also have a good number of shows coming up. I'm very excited to say that tomorrow we have a little bit of a special event. Over the summer, we have been completely redesigning and replanting our Poets Garden in the back. We have a brand new garden out there. I encourage you all to come back tomorrow at 5:30. One of our audience members will be reading a couple poems, Holiday Mason, out there in the garden. We'll have some music, we'll have some drinks. It's just a nice time to come and have a drink and check out our new space. Additionally, we have coming up next Saturday a special tribute to the great Harry Northrop, who's been a big member of our community from the very beginning, from I think 1969, pretty much. That will be online, and then later in the month we have a day of Latinx punk rock and social justice. It's called Beyond Baroque. There'll be some bands, there'll be some music, there'll be events. It should be a good time, so please do check that out as well. But we also have a very big event coming up, which is our 55th anniversary gala. That is October 21st. We will be honoring some representatives of the generations that have built Beyond Baroque over the years. We'll be honoring our first artistic director, Jim Crusoe. We'll be honoring Ed Ruchet, who's been a major supporter of ours for many years. Amanda Gorman, who's become a very big supporter of ours and is one of our alums. We'll be honoring Hiram Sims, who created the Sims Library of Poetry. Xochitl Bermejo, who runs Women Who Submit, as well as our longtime artist in residence, Bob Brannaman, and finally, two of LA's finest poets, Amy Gersler and Lynn Thompson. So a kind of expanded lineup, but it's going to be a big deal. We're going to have an art auction. We'll have entertainment. So please do check that out. Tickets should be on sale, I think, next week. So we all encourage you to come. Beyond that, I just want to say, please do support us, even if you can't come to the gala. You can do that in a couple of ways. You can become a member, a little $60. Gets you into events if we're charged, it gets you in them for free. It helps keep these events free as well. Gets you a discount on our workshops. And if you become a member and you want a discount on a workshop, we do have a workshop with one of our readers tonight, Christopher Merrill, who's teaching a workshop tomorrow. It's 11 o'clock, is that right, Chris? Yeah. So, you can get a special deal if you become a member tonight. But please do support us. But above all, support White Pine Press, support our authors. We have all of their books for sale in the bookstore after the show. So please do buy them. I think all of our readers will be willing to sign them. If they aren't willing, I apologize for the rudeness. Not my fault. But beyond that, this is just a really fantastic program. I will not be the MC for the rest of the evening. We have instead one of our favorite poets, White Pine Press author, Gail Wronsky, who is a now retired professor at LMU, and really just a wonderful writer, curator, and, as I think you will learn, MC. So please, everyone, welcome Gail Wronsky.
Very graceful. Thank you, Quentin. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be at Beyond Baroque, which is my favorite poetry venue, maybe in the world. It's just such a lovely place to be, and I really appreciate the support you've given White Pine Press and us, many of us in the audience as poets. White Pine Press was started in 1973 by Dennis Maloney, and he was like 3 years old at the time. No. No. Yeah. And has had an incredible 50 years. I mean, he has published Nobel Prize winners like William Golding, Juan Ramon Jimenez, Gabriela Mistral, and Pablo Neruda, and a lot of Thomas Transtromer, Alfonsina Storni, not a Nobel Prize winner, but a wonderful poet from Argentina. Just so many people and so many translations, and his mission really is about kind of breaking down the language barriers and making poetry accessible to people in other languages, and making poetry in other languages accessible to English language readers. And it's all about his belief that literature really is a great vehicle for social reform, social justice, making us all more human. And I think that's such an admirable thing he's done. So please, let's have a hand for Dennis Maloney. So this is a really stellar cast of readers, and I have their bios here, and they are so amazingly impressive. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to read them because there was no way I could remember all this stuff. We have 2 physicists here. We have 2 publishers, me and Dennis. We've got Chris Merrill, who's, just an international diplomat, basically, for poetry. And I mean, it's just, and Tzveta Sofronieva, Wang, the physicists are just, and Hélène Cardona, who is, and most of us know her. She's a wonderful poet and translator. So let me I'll read the bios in the order that the poets will be reading. Okay, so Hélène Cardona is a poet, actor, translator, and linguist, the author of A Life in Suspension, which is called A Vivid Self-Portrait as Scholar, Seer, and Muse by John Ashbery, and Dreaming My Animal Selves, described as, quote, liminal, mystical, and otherworldly by David Mason. She has authored 5 translations, including The Abduction by Maram Al-Masri, winner of an Albertine and Face Foundation Prize, the recipient of more than 20 awards and honors, including the Independent Press Award and a Hemingway grant. She holds an MA in American Literature from the Sorbonne, received fellowships from the Goethe Institute and the International University of Andalusia, worked as a translator, interpreter for the Canadian Embassy, and has taught at Hamilton College and Loyola Marymount University. Her own work has been translated into 19 languages. That's amazing. Yay. Wang's poetry books include The Book of Mirrors, winner of the 26th White Pine Press Poetry Prize in 2020. The Book of Totality, Salmon Poetry Press, 2015. The Book of Jade, winner of the 15th Nicholas Roerich Poetry Prize, Storyline Press, 2002, and a book of translation, Dreaming of Fallen Blossoms, Tune Poems of Su Dong Po, White Pine Press, 2019. She is a cosmologist, not a cosmetician. They're very different. She's a cosmologist at Caltech, currently focusing on developing NASA space missions to explore the universe. What a line, what a credential. I'm just in awe of this woman. Christopher Merrill, I'm in awe of all these people. It's insane. Christopher Merrill has published 7 collections of poetry, including Watch Fire, for which he received the Lavon Younger Poets Award from the Academy of American Poets, many edited volumes and translations, and 6 books of nonfiction, among them Only the Nails Remain, Scenes from the Balkan Wars, Things of the Hidden God, Journey to the Holy Mountain, The Tree of Doves, Ceremony, Expedition, War, and Self-Portrait, and Self-Portrait with Dogwood. His writings have been translated into nearly 40 languages. His journalism appears widely. His honors include a Chevalier des Arts, a des Lettres from the French government, numerous translations awards and fellowships from the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial and Ingram Merrill Foundations. As director of the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa since 2000, Merrill has conducted cultural diplomacy missions to more than 50 countries. He served on the U.S. National Commission for UNESCO from 2011 to 2018, and in April 2012, President Barack Obama appointed him to the National Council on the Humanities. Amazing. Yes. Then Tzveta Sofronieva is a multilingual author of more than 20 books, including 2 by White Pine Press. Multiverse in 2020, a collection of new and selected poems written originally in German, Bulgarian, and English, edited by J.K. Dobbs, and a handful, that's Jennifer Kwan Dobbs, right? Yes.
Also by White Pine.
Okay, and a handful of Water, which was translated from German by Chantal Wright with a 2009 Penheim Translation Fund grant, and won the 2012 Cliff Becker Book Prize in Translation. Tzveta's poetry has been translated into 19 languages. The alumna of the Villa Aurora in Pacific Palisades, she is currently writer-in-residence in the International Writing Program in Iowa, a physicist and historian of science by training. She's also a playwright, essayist, anthologist, and poetry translator. Born in Sofia, Bulgaria, she is home now in Berlin, Germany. Dennis Maloney. Yeah, well, let's just maybe clap. Okay. Dennis Maloney is a poet and translator. This thing has an ant on it. Everything I bring from my house has ants on them. Okay. A number of... It's that time of year. Dennis Maloney is a poet and translator, and oftentimes people think of him as a publisher, but I really think we need to think about him as a poet first and a publisher second. A number of volumes of his own poetry have been published, including The Map is Not the Territory, Just Enough, and Listening to Dao Yan Ming. A bilingual German-English volume, Empty Cup, was published in Germany in 2017, and in 2021, a chapbook, Some Windows, with translations in several languages, appeared in Germany from Hochroth Verlag. Recent collections include The Things I Notice Now, The Faces of Guanyin, and Windows. He is also the editor and publisher of the widely respected White Pine Press in Buffalo, New York. Okay, so we're beginning with Hélène.
Well, thank you so much, Gail. It's just so wonderful to be among friends, and thank you so much to Beyond Baroque for always hosting us so beautifully. And I just realized we've known each other so long, Gail. Before my first book came out in 2006 with Red Hen, we knew each other, and the same with Dennis. We've known each other since at least 2006 as well. And so I just love all these friendships. I think as writers and as translators, we're just building bridges, and we're just forming beautiful friendships along the way. And with Chris Merrill, I had the pleasure of translating Walt Whitman into French, Whitman's war writings for Whitman Webb for the University of Iowa and the International Writing Center. And Tzveta, I just met in person. We had communicated for a while thanks to Dennis, and Tzveta is so magical for all of us who had the chance to be at Villa Aurora last night. It was just such a magical evening, and Yoon, of course, known for a while as well. So I'm just delighted. I'm going to read from The Abduction, my new translation of Franco-Syrian poet Maram al-Masri. And as things work out, this is my second book with White Pine Press with Dennis Maloney, the legend that is Dennis Maloney. And it won this Albertine and Face Foundation grant. And the first book was Beyond Elsewhere, which won the Hemingway grant with Dennis and White Pine. And this is how I met Maram, is through Gabrielle Arnoulot-Jacques. So when I translated Beyond Elsewhere, I read the book in French and I fell in love with it. And Maram had written such a beautiful introduction. I didn't know her work, and that was in 2015. And I just fell in love with it, or 14. And I just fell in love with, I discovered her work and fell in love with it and started translating it. So Maram is from Syria, and she had to exile herself in France. We know about the war in Syria, and so The Abduction is an autobiographical book. Is what happened to her. She had arrived in France and had a baby, and the father kidnapped the baby and took him to Syria, and she did not get to see her son for 13 years because of the situation in Syria and because of the patriarchal way the society is there. So it's a beautiful book about motherhood and about the pain of losing her child, and then the joy and the beauty of reconnecting with her child. And then it's in two parts, and the second part is about the act of writing. So I'll only read a few poems since I talked. And I'll start with the first poem, which is called, it's the poem that opens the book, 9 months. 9 months, and life grows in the womb, like a poem grows in imagination. 9 months, and a body grows inside another body. 9 months, and the weight weaves hope and dreams. 9 months for silence to grow into a cry, like a loaf of bread rising, or round moon reaching fullness. 9 months for a heart to flutter inside a heart. 9 months for a life to begin. He has begun to speak to me. He has begun to speak to me with his 8 tiny teeth, drool on his lips. He tells me, with his eyes, things that seem to him very important. Perhaps he's telling me about the war and the children born to die every day. Or perhaps he speaks of faraway islands, of birds, of dreams, of crises, of famines. I don't know if he wants to tell me the future will be sunny and a day will come when people live in peace. He is occupied, making his 10 fingers move to convince me that love is the natural fruit of the tree of life, and that he's happy to have come into this world. Then, suddenly, he embraces me, burrowing his head into my chest, begging me to take him into my arms. In that instant, I understand all that he wants to tell me. I sent you, my love, by mail. I fashioned it into small toys so you could play. I fashioned it into a woolen polo shirt so you'd be warm. I sent you, my love, by mail. I traded it for 2 boxes of aspirin, a toothbrush, cakes, chocolates, bicycle. Did you receive the package? At my door, 2 suitcases. At my door, 2 suitcases, and a young man, tall and slim, dark brown, hesitant, like one who has lost his way. At my door, 2 worn suitcases, like dock workers' clothes in the port of a poor city. They carry the scent of distant lands, memories, histories, like a prisoner's chains. A young, dark brown man with black hair, his black eyes aswim in a white sea. He knocks on the door of my heart. The world is hard, my son. Hard as a machine gun magazine, hard as the walls of a detention center, hard as the look of contempt. I didn't warn you to wait before coming to join me. I didn't warn you. Little plans get easily tramped. I didn't warn you. Here, you must be strong. Here, they like diplomas. They like bank accounts. I warn you. The drowned cannot save the drowning. Immigrant, you will always be in the crosshairs of suspicion. I didn't warn you. Immigrants arrive fragile as infants. To love. To love is to give another the possibility of doing without you. To love is to prepare yourself to be abandoned. And I'll close with the bread of letters. Who will blame the trees when they lose their leaves? Who will accuse the sea of abandoning shells on the sand? I, mother woman, woman mother, with 2 breasts for pleasure and 2 breasts for maternity, forgive the milk of music, tell stories, explain games, light up feelings, and the grammar of thoughts. I, woman of delight and tenderness, virtuous and sinful, mature and childlike, with my mouth I feed the bread of letters, consonants and vowels, sentences, synonyms and comparisons. Who will accuse me of making a gift of my body to love? The act of writing, isn't it a scandalous act in itself? To write is learning to know our most intimate thoughts. Yes, I am scandalous because I show my truth and my nakedness of woman. Yes, I am scandalous because I scream my sorrow and my hope, my desire, my hunger and my thirst. To write is to describe the multiple faces of man, the beautiful and the ugly, the tender and the cruel. To write is to die in front of someone who looks at you unmoved. It is to drown in front of a boat passing you by without seeing you. To write is to be the boat that saves the drowning. To write is to live on the cliff's edge, clinging to a blade of grass. When I write, myself belongs to the other. With this conviction, I am freed.
Well, first I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I want to thank Beyond Baroque for hosting us in this beautiful setting, although I can see people with this light over. All right, so thank you, Gail, for setting this up. Dennis, I'm so grateful to you for making me part of the White Pine family. Okay, so first I will read the first poem from this beautiful book that Dennis published in 2019. It's poetry from almost 1,000 years ago. So I don't see it in the bookstore, but you can go to White Pine website and find it if it's indeed not in bookstore. So tune poems of Su Dongpo. Su Dongpo is considered one of the three greatest Chinese poets who ever lived. So you know the other two well, Li Bai and Du Fu. Okay, Su Dongpo is less well known for some reason. So this poem that I shall read is one of his best known and most beloved poems in China. All the school children can recite it because it's in textbook, they're required to. I will first read it in Chinese. Even though I can recite it, I don't trust myself, in case I miss a word. 别念花，春景。花褪残红青杏小，燕子飞时，绿水人家扰。枝上柳绵吹又少，天涯何处无芳草。墙里秋千墙外道，墙外行人，墙里佳人笑。笑渐不闻声渐消，多情却被无情恼。To the tune of butterfly and flowers, spring. Blossoms fade in withered red, and apricots are tiny. Swallows appear in the sky, green water swirls around houses. Willow catkins peel off branches in the wind. Where at the sky's edge does fragrant grass not thrive? Behind the wall is a swing, beyond the wall is a trail. Beyond the wall a traveler passes, behind the wall a girl laughs. The laughter wanes and the sound dies away. The heart is undone by the heartless. Thank you. It's even better with music. Okay, so next I'll read a few poems from this beautiful book. Dennis published the Book of Mirrors, my poetry book. And I apologize to my fellow readers who may have heard this before. They're my favorite poems from the book. But to mitigate that, I will end with a couple of recent poems to amuse you. So the first poem I will read from the Book of Mirrors is titled Nipstrom. I love music, so all my friends know that, okay? So Nipstrom means love dream. I'm sure I did not pronounce it correctly, but it's it's a musical form. It's the title of a piece by Liszt. So this poem was inspired when I went to a cosmology conference on the campus of UC Berkeley in January of 2000. Okay, I was walking along, looking at the sky, and then suddenly I heard someone playing the piano. Was so perfect. At first I thought it was a recording, Then I realized it was actually someone playing an outside piano, I was totally stunned. So this poem came from that. Nipstrom. A tree blooms in the night sky, each star a flower forbidden. A stranger plays the piano, pulses light to shadow. A million trees bend with weight of gravitating dark matter. Each star's love unrequited, each planet a path not taken. The stranger's coat darkens the night. Strands of hair brush his pale face. Winter plum blossoms stare starlight, a scented portal in time. In the singing of forgotten dreams, I step through and drown. So now switching gears and now reading a slightly longer poem that reflects my obsession with history, as you can tell from the title, Thousands of Years at a Glance. I hope doesn't sound pretentious, you'll see. And also, towards the end, the penultimate stanza actually refers to a astronomy paper, okay, in case you think I made it up. Okay, so I don't want to spoil it for you. So be patient and wait for the surprise towards the end. Thousands of years at a glance. African lilies trumpet indigo, hymn inaudible to human ears. Seeds were planted for the first time 117 centuries ago. Ideograms once carved on turtle shells stare back from obsidian screens. 1,000-year-old cherry tree bursts into a waterfall of blossoms. Jacarandas suit up in green fern feathers. The crescent fairies cloudward dreams. Rockets began as fireworks in China. 2 millennia rushed by in smoke. Lotuses emblazoned the goddess headdress on the skull of the Scythian warrior queen. An iron hawk in an eagle's shape, buried with 30 iron arrowheads. She swept the Silk Road on a roan stallion, her azure cape gathering starlight. 36 other civilizations might exist in the Milky Way's vast wheel of stars. It would be a nightmare if all our wishes came true. So it's a science paper towards the end there. I should say it's somewhat speculative, but it's actually based on statistics and astronomical data. The two people who have been most important to me in my life are my father and my son. My son is here with me today. My father passed away 12 years ago. So this next poem, a prose poem, is about my father and also the origin of my last name, Wang. Will refer to a teenage prince. So in case you're wondering, I think he was 19, and in ancient China, a lad of that age, if he was actually a prince, a crown prince, did have kids already. Just to get that out of the way. And right, so this is autobiographical and based on what actually happened. Including the dream. Okay, I will refer to a dream that I actually did have. I was kind of shaking up when I woke up. The butterfly. The day after I buried my father's ashes on a mountain, a giant black swallowtail languidly glided over camellias. My father was old Wang. The first one, a dashing teenage prince, died in 547 BC. 30 years later, the alien king dreamed the prince descended on a white crane playing the sun. I dreamed of the future, where a man stands trial for loneliness. I defend him, noting that in my own time, so long ago, loneliness was the human condition. In another dream, I consort with an intimate stranger. He holds my hands, gazes into my eyes, in a valley of towering statues ringed by turquoise mountains. Legend made the prince immortal. He ascended in moonglow from a mountaintop, his white robe dancing in the wind. The butterfly was Zhuangzi dreaming this world, or my father returning with dark wings embossed with silver and emerald. Moonlight fills me through shut eyelids. I melt into the lucid stream. I forgot to explain the Zhuangzi reference. So Zhuangzi is the greatest Taoist, second only to Lao Tzu, who is the founder of Taoism. And Zhuangzi is most famous for having a butterfly dream in which he dreamed. So Zhuangzi had a dream in which he was a butterfly. Okay, when he woke up, he wondered if he was the butterfly dreaming of being a man. So something to think about. Okay, so last poem from that book is a much happier one because it's about my son. Trying really hard not to embarrass him here. Epiphany. Rocks bounce backlit water drops, sparkling nets of time. Ferns line up luminous banners. The temple of ancient pine grove hushes thoughts. My son closes his eyes to listen to the waterfall's song, brightens it with his presence. He surely brightens my life. So now, as promised, I'm going to entertain my friends with two much newer poems. One of them is really funny, also based on a dream. And so I just revealed to people I've been carrying out a secret project of the last year. I was translating the Tao Te Ching in collaboration with Liang Ni. So I got so into it. I was having interesting dreams. Okay, so this poem is based on an actual dream that I had, which should be scary, except I woke up laughing. And also, one of the things I learned from the Tao Te Ching is the Taoist scripture by Lao Tzu. Notes 3. I dream someone pointing a gun at me. Can anyone truly love their enemy? Lao Tzu said, heaven saves someone by kindling kindness in them. Kindness is the ocean to which all streams flow, the temple hidden within each heart. It refuses no one. I burst into laughter, tickling my enemy. So I really did have that dream, so it's really crazy. So I woke up and thought, hey, I have to write a poem about that. So, and also, with something enjoyable, hopefully for everyone. It's a sci-fi poem, or a futuristic fantasy, right? So if someone asks me if you could have any experience you want in the whole universe in any period of time, right? So this is one possibility. I should mention that this poem was first published on an online journal called the Abstract TV Mag, and then was discovered and included in the Cambridge University anthology titled Outer Space 100 Poems. Okay, so this has some science in. Being a professional cosmologist, I can assure you every scientific detail in this is accurate, validated. It just sneaked in there, okay? I didn't try to put science in there. But anyway, it's a sci-fi poem, right? Sci-fi is more companion, perhaps more enjoyable, when it seems real. Space Journal, Serendipity. En route to Andromeda, I launch luminous spheres into the black desert of space to measure the expansion of the universe. Back to the garden, the air sparkles. Hildegard Baron's singing Brunhilda's dilemma. Resist the urge to touch rainbow fish in the lily pond. Climb the aspen tree, its eyes latch onto my toes. Light takes 2 million years to reach Andromeda. The universe is almost empty. A cat's reflection gazes back at me from the dome's translucent dark vault. Oh, and by the way, I'm the cat, obviously, right? So thank you so much.
What a cool gathering. So nice to hear these poems and to see all of you. I have known Dennis and his wife, Elaine Lamantina, for 30 years now, and had the good luck to publish first with him a book of translations by the Slovenian poet Aleš Debeljak. And I want to read the last poem in that book. Your story's simple. You won't see many loved ones when you return, like an otter surfacing in a lake to catch its breath. You won't find words for short greetings, the seasons, unsuccessful missions, white phosphorus lighting the passion in soldiers' eyes, a distant whistle on steep hillsides you never climbed, children's cane baskets floating silently across a river basin, the way you have a constant burning pain, the constellations discovered in a premonition, oriental love songs, the disappointment of everything we were and will be. Believe me, this is your story. Later, I'll tell it again, only better. And I've known Gail for 40 years. We were graduate students together in Salt Lake City a long time ago, and I remember asking her if she had always been a surrealist poet. And she said, not until I saw the desert here in Utah. She said it was so strange I had to write differently. But I've known somebody here even longer than that, and that is Tim Gustafson, who's a professor of English at the University of Southern California. And 50 years ago, I had the good luck to live a couple of houses away from him. He was my idol as a soccer player. And so we shared that. And when I did a book tour for my first prose book, which was about World Cup soccer, my favorite part of it was coming to USC and giving a talk to the women's soccer team. It was just as women's soccer and a reading, and women's soccer was just starting to take off here, and I've often thought about that. So here's something I did a lot 2 houses away from Tim Gustafson when I was a kid. A boy juggling a soccer ball after practice, right foot to left foot, stepping forward and back to right foot and left foot up to his thigh, holding it on his thigh as he twists around in a circle until it rolls down the inside of his leg like a tickle of sweat, now catching and tapping on the soft side of his foot and juggling once, twice, 3 times, hopping on one foot like a jump roper in the gym, now trapping and holding the ball in mid-air, balancing on the instep of his weak left foot, stepping forward and back, then lifting it overhead until it hangs there, and squaring off his body, he keeps the ball aloft with a nudge of his neck, heading it from side to side, softer and softer, like a dying refrain, until the ball, slowing, balances itself on his hairline, the hot sun and sweat filling his eyes as he jiggles this way and that, then flicking it up gently, hunching his shoulders and tilting his head back, he traps it in the hollow of his neck, and bending at the waist, sees his shadow, his dangling t-shirt, the bent blades of brown grass in summer heat, and relaxing, the ball slipping down his back and missing his foot. He wheels around, he marches over the ball as if it were a rock he stumbled into, and pressing his left foot against it, he pushes it against the inside of his right until it pops into the air, is heeled over his head, the rainbow, and settles on his extended thigh before rolling over his knee and down his shin so he can juggle it again from his left foot to his right foot and right foot to left foot to thigh as he wanders on the last day of summer around the empty field. It's a true story. 2 days after I wrote that poem, I got offered a job coaching the B soccer team at Middlebury College. It's proof that poetry can change your life. This is from a book called Brilliant Water that Dennis published. My favorite part about it is the painting on the cover by Paul Klee. Oh, I was so happy when that arrived. The fence. Once upon a time is what the fence dividing up a mountain range announces in lines at once irregular and even. For drama, it depends upon a clear beginning, middle, and end. Its effects cathartic, purging landowners of their terror, interlopers of their pity. On guard, the playwright cries, all the world's a fence, the groundlings say. In the ancient quarrel between fancy and the imagination, the fence takes both sides, nor does it distinguish between form and content, poetry and prose. These are the 4 directions of the fence: up, down, right, wrong, black, white, male, female. Nevertheless, at night, the fence points only toward the future, time's true north. In Tennessee, someone is pouring the wilderness into a jar. That's one way to build a fence. Here's another. Trace a pebble's lineage back to creation. Vested with moonflowers and intimations of the miraculous, the fence tilts into the hills, loosening its nails in a provocative fashion, unbuckling the armor men are saving for the final days. See how the fence swaggers in the wind, embodying a dying sense of justice, how it casts a shadow over the rumpled sheets of mud tucked into an arroyo in the wake of a flash flood, how it reveals our weakness for design. For we carried the fence like our accents and dances into the wilds of this sprawling continent, where it survived our twangs and replaced our two steps. This is where we sang until our throats, our thoughts were raw. And this is what results from myth giving way to law and history. Who will accept the fence's first and final offer? The earth itself is a fence, according to the cartographers of the afterlife, in a universe awash in fences, a belief the demographers reject. Obscured by the rivers and rock walls the fence crosses and climbs is one stark fact. Whether the world ends in fire or ice, the fence will live happily ever after. And I'll conclude with a prose poem from this most recent book that Dennis published, Flares. It's a book of prose poems that I wrote almost entirely while I was traveling around the world doing these cultural diplomacy missions for the US State Department. And so I think of it as a kind of secret story of those travels, if you will. And this poem is called The Zoo. The parachute failed to open, also his reserve chute, and his instructor was on the plane banking toward the Rio Grande, returning to the landing strip on the mesa where they had met in the spring. A man in a free fall, spread eagle on a cushion of air between two mountain ranges, is not a metaphor for anything beyond the fact that things end, sometimes spectacularly. This he had known since summer, when she had warned him that it could not contain. This he had known since summer, when she had warned him that it could not continue like this. And now, on a cool autumn morning, the diver had never seen such a rush of colors: the cerulean sky, the red soil with which his wife threw pots for the craft shows, the green of the pinon pines. There was smoke on the wind from a burning field. Flecks of blue sparkled in the brown river, and he could almost taste the juniper berries about to be plucked by the magpies. His life did not flash before his eyes as he plummeted toward the earth, his arms flailing like a swimmer dragged out to sea. What came to him instead was a moment in the kitchen with his mother after a school trip to the zoo. She set out on the table a plate with a peanut butter sandwich and a glass of cider, lit a cigarette, and said, "Did you see anything interesting?" Thank you very much.
Good evening. When I was a teenager in Sofia, when the wall fell down, Magda Kaneci and Dana Zajc from Romania and Slovenia showed me their books done by White Pine Press. And I thought, what a dream it would be to be published by White Pine Press. 2012, Willis Barnstone was so generous, so gave me this dream come true because he chose my poems. He could read German and also the wonderful translation of Chantal Wright. So I got into the White Pine with this book, A Handful of Water, which is written in German, not in Bulgarian. And I'm extremely happy to be here, but I want to start with a poem I wrote 18 years ago here for Beyond Baroque. I would never think I read it here because when I was at the Villa Aurora, I just loved the place, and I loved the beach, and I loved that it's a fire place here and a poetry place. So yesterday I talked a lot about writing multilingually and about writing physics and so on. And today I just want to make presents I hope I'm not too long, but I make a present to you as audience, the poem about Venice and California, and then to each of the poet fellows, one poem. Happiness after reading Schopenhauer in California. Along the roses between their petals, time travels in drops. Is the petal still alive after it has been plucked? Children are wonderful at this age when they no longer bite their nails, when their features are finely drawn, framed by their hair, and with a smile that proudly reveals Mona Lisa's likeness. And time rolls on like loaves of bread and buns, with no sign yet of mold, stashed between school books in a satchel, nibbled by milk teeth and by the other kind, all arranged in sequential hammery. Growing up is wonderful, a kitty cat and a lava horse, a terracotta warrior from Xi'an and a teddy bear. How lovely, how wonderful, the touch of petals, pointed and smooth, green and pink, the joy of being thin, being loved, being healthy, at peace, and at school with your friends. What else can one say about a mother's happiness between the roses of Sofia, Berlin, and Los Angeles? We climb under the splash of the waterfall through the rainbow up the mountain, wet and immediately dried by the sun rays, then soaked again and glowing in the cycle of water and sun. Later the heat sticks on our tides. We are very near the Earth's core. Our cells are being sucked dry. Yosemite, Zion, Death Valley, rain from yesterday or from 1,000 years ago. The difference between the deserts of snow, the Mars Desert, and the salt isn't born out of their names. Is one of them somehow less that, simply because we won't refer to it that way? And each time happiness is measured in drops of water contained in plastic bottles, which we bought, then emptied a moment ago. The Navajo won't look you in the eye. Here I recover from the superficial gaze outside the reservation. Is the star of which only rays survive a sun or a black hole? It has been that for a long time. It's either nothing or something else, but its rays reach us and touch our pupils. Is anybody well enough acquainted with the dead stars to have earned the happiness of giving birth to them once more? And because pleasure and enjoyment are not a given, and you can really only trust pain, and because imagination doesn't tame the everyday, infecting it with hopes and fears instead, going to one party on Saturday isn't enough. Go to a succession of parties, plays, films, exhibitions, shows, beach volleyball tournaments, and don't miss the school children's concert, the first garden graders rock group, the immigrant kids, jamming with Jack Nicholson's grandchildren. Poetry vanished from words long ago. Words were never in poetry. That much is obvious. Also, so is something else. Poetry nests on the facade of the fire station, or was it the police station in American Venice, and traces the tracks made by chicky pigeons on Venezia's palace walls. Who dares maintain that happiness is opposite and has a fixed location? But on subject of happiness, Gluck, that wonderful word, I recommend Schopenhauer. My analysis is subjective. It compares sounds. Gluck has lots of luken. Luck rhymes with muck and stuck. In Bulgarian shastie, happiness is often hard to swallow. There is a lot of st and st, lots of st and sh. Shallow, shabby, shameful, symbolic, shackled. Happiness is happenstance. Shtastie and its various swallowings are so interesting to explore. Not the torturous desire for happiness, but an honest stutter pops up in the other languages. Happiness trips up on the P, Gluck glucks down the throat. Kismet, in fact, should be pronounced kismet, curdles and goes sour when it keeps outside the fridge. You are unable to swallow it and develop a convulsive stutter on the A or on the I. The containers where we store our happiness are not without significance. This poem was translated by Chantal Wright, and I will go on with a poem I wrote half German and half English, and it is here translated or done and edited only in English. And I wrote it for Dennis Maloney because after he published my book and I figured out that he's a poet, I just started reading him, and became one of my kind of friends overseas, keeping me alive sometimes when times are hard. And this is Sleepless, for Dennis. Long sleepless nights, zero melatonin, not allowed for sale in Berlin. Chronic pain, but diclofenac is not available in the US without a prescription. Both are correct, says my liver, even though vice versa is possible. I still don't know anymore what is good and what is not. War is infinite, and studying physics doesn't help, neither me nor the German chancellor, doesn't even help the Canadian astronaut who sings in outer space, has no inner fears, and repeats his song to dreamt perfection. We all repeat, wars, diseases, we reiterate our desperation. Dark matter is becoming increasingly fashionable. Dark energy seems to get over that. And I'm sleepless, trying to understand what isn't dark in the metaphor. Far away in Big Sur, a friend dreams the dreams of my Kyoto friends, and I'm in between, a sleepless princess who has guarded the secret of peace for 100 years. I teach about the story of killing to the children from Kabul, children in Berlin, about the outcome of a replacement war. Teach myself not to give up and to continue, to believe that humanity can, and so can I, survive in this universe by rejecting all killing and taking responsibility to overcome the fear of death. I call on poetry for help, as in the Bulgarian fairy tale, the sons called on trouble for such a long time till they found their own way to go on. And I do not cross borders and do not help others to cross borders because I don't understand where the sides are. For me, it's all one. And thus I walk, becoming myself a border, boundary, rim, edge, a living line, rejecting the whole concept of exclusion. I'm sleepless in a palace without a fence, and no roses, no hopelessly longing to wake up through kisses. One never wakes up because of others. There is a poem that Gail chose. You know that Rhinoceros bicornis, I think it's the Latin pronunciation, is the bone powder of rhinoceros that everybody kills for being sexually active or healthy, or I don't know. So, 3 times daily Rhinoceros bicornis. Like when you are choking your mother, like when the daughter strangles her mother because the men have blown themselves up with all the children. Like when the daughter tightens the thread around her mother's neck because fate has her hanging by a thread, a fate that was meant for another but become hers. Like when shooting at the father, like when the son shoots the father because 3 suicide bombers have become his fate, the fate of the son, even though that fate was not meant for anyone. Like when a black rhino calls SOS, like when a black rhino calls because it cannot accept that its fate is already sealed, that man and animal die together because the human likes to die, because he likes to bring others to death even more. Like when it's prescribed, when it's been written in a prescription that taking Rhinoceros bicornis 3 times daily leads to God. Like when 3 times a week one suicide bomber is commanded. Like when someone believes that God could be reached by killing, that he exists, and then he issues prescriptions to kill. Like when people think it's being prescribed. Like when the humans think that killing is their fate. Like when one is drowning children, when one is letting children drown at sea, like when one doesn't think about it much, like when one thinks about it yet simply looks on, like when one has thought, has looked, and now is no longer looking. Like when you're a woman, and that doesn't make a difference because the fate is the same, the fate of humankind, the story of the earth. Like when strangling the mother, shooting the father, drowning the children, eradicating the dinosaurs and blowing oneself up helps you forget that God cannot help you. Like when I'm the one who is that human, like when I'm not that one, I'm not. The one for the fellow physicist friend. Stages of matter. Big Bang egg. Through fire, inorganic and unconscious. Through water, organic and unconscious. Through language, organic and aware. Through knowledge, artificial intelligence, organic and unorganic, cyborg. Growing up, finding a loophole in the mask, complete transformation to imago, fully unorganic and very conscious. So God becomes it, her, him, themselves, sorts it, her, him, themselves out. After we have created it, her, him, them, after it, she, he, they created us, we are God as a larva. So then I have one for Chris, because it has 17 languages, and you should know them all from the fellows in the program. It's part of the Anthropocene book, and we're the thoughts of Maria about networks. Kapusta Maria, Maria's cabbage column, Maria Pusta Maria, Kapustjala Zeliva Zelina Zele. Zele cheesecake, käsekuchen, Fütsch, Hedges Labanel, Hedges Kuram, Heged Schmelf, Kulitene Planinate, Politea Planinar, Politene Plan, et a oversized chromosome, Gartenhaag, Mücke, Kräuter, Beche, Bach, Klank, Wacht, ach, Maria, Madonna mia. Then I have one written in English, which is for Hélène. The strings of multiverse and the strings of guitars do not differ in our imagination. We need music desperately, all this music in the ghettos, all these colors around the globe, all these smiles and tears on the road. Refugees meet migrant hunters, and the music non-stop, a collision, noise inside blood, rhythm in legs, in the penniless days, amidst cultural shocks, black, white, other, and more, voices and fingers, and the guitars are the same, red and electric ones, the head of the singer, the guitarist's fingers, the pianist's forehead, the drummer's cheeks, my lip, my pen, the heart of my hope, tangled in a string theory as an excuse. So these were all made by me, and I come back to Chantal Wright's translations and the first book with a last poem, which is for all of us, Unlost in Translation. The window at the front and right of my compartment reflects the scene on the left at my rear. I can see what is passing superimposed on what is coming, and it is as though the light likes this game, irrespective of where the sun is or where the train is heading. Thank you.
Dennis insisted that I read a couple of poems, so I will. And then everybody insisted. So I know this is long, but these are two short poems from my White Pine book, Under the Capsized Boat We Fly, new and selected poems. This one is called The Petty Infinite. The jasmine by my studio is flowering. O simple life on the surface of the planet, my writing limbo oscillates before it. Then the other plants begin to waken and the ground perks up. I'm a mad woman living in the midst of such profound activity and such smallness. Let love take its chances here. Let love luminesce and mark time in this yellow mill wheel of days. We existed here, where the owl swayed on top of the swaying cypress tree. What did we want from each other? To die having said it all? To win having lost it all? One fragile about face from the stars. And conspiratorial we. Hammers and fingernails withheld even in the midst of frenzied days and envies. Nonplussed sun which moves behind mountains to caution the edges of our eyes. Mouths which nothing can outdie. Under the disordered dusk, through mysterious windows, we meet and conspire, bathe our daydreams in gin. So much said already in the twilight. We are alive, but do not demand much of it. We don't believe in anything but ghosts. We don't question people badly dressed in mourning. Under the heavy heel, we are alive and weightless. Under the capsized boat, we fly. Thank you.
Many thanks to Beyond Baroque and to Gail and all our other readers for being part of this celebration. It's, as Gail said, we're celebrating 50 years. And this poem, first poem, in short sections, may explain the name of the press. The poem is called White Pine. It's probably written about 50 years ago. 5 long needles, soft to the touch when brushed against hand or face. The resinous scent of pitch stuck to the fingers lingers still. White pine is imperfect. Snow completes it. In this place I plant the tree of the great peace. Under the shade of the great white pine, we sit on soft white cushions of thistledown, roots spread in all directions. And that's from Iroquois myth. White pine is one of the fundamental main trees of the Western New York area where I grew up and still live. Heart's Content, Pennsylvania, the logger's apology for the destruction of the white pine forests of New York and Pennsylvania, 20 acres of virgin biotic intelligence left like it was before. White pine, what was given me to ride by the sweet lady who sang me these songs, whispered to the heart, the mysteries constantly revealed, seldom understood. This poem is a letter to James Wright, a poet who was helpful when I was first starting to be a poet, because I came from a working class family and wasn't sure I was capable of being a poet. And I started reading James Wright and realized he came from a similar background. Letter to James Wright. Our fathers labored in that same bitter factory. They just called hell by a different name. Yours in Hazel Atlas glass and mine in the lampblack and chemicals of Hewitt Robbins. They endured week after week that turned to decades learning to tolerate what no man could ever love. A life that wears a man down to a poorly functioning machine. I worked 2 summers in that factory and tasted the bitterness. We both ran from that ugliness, frightened we would be trapped in a life there too. I now work in that place where you labored, facing the white page to conjure a world beyond the one into which we were born. This poem is for Tzveta. I have a series called Border Crossings, which grew out of largely out of going to Europe and being part of some writers' festivals. And I'm a translator, co-translator from Spanish and Japanese, so it's about the process of translation and all of that. On the dark nights when I have no words of my own, translations calm me. Let me jump deep in, letter by letter, soaking up the dampness of the words. I hear a whispering sigh like the sea in the dark, as both poem and self exist in a constant state of becoming. What draws us as translators to seek an equivalent music from one tongue to another? Affinities of vibrancy, listening to the meaning that resides flowering beyond the thickness of dictionaries. Nibbling at the edges of the poem, we give contours to shadows. How do we translate the silence that lives between the lines? I am a nomad searching for a language in which I am a word unbound, wandering between the world we inhabit and the one we create. And I'll finish with a few short poems from my most recent book, which is titled Windows. And they're all untitled pieces. It has an epigraph from Rainer Rilke from his French poems. Window, are you not our geometry, whose simple shape circumscribes effortlessly this enormous life? The glass pane of the window serves to frame the view within and without, a transparent gate through which light passes, and at the same time a mirror reflecting life on the street, smudged and streaked with rain. This book is a window looking out on a shifting landscape. This one's for Yun, who's in honor of your translation of Dao De Ching. Lao Tzu said, windows and doors are carved for a house, but it's a space that makes it work. A house can hold many things because it is empty. Doors are mouths and nose, windows are eyes and ears. Existence makes something useful, but non-existence makes it work. And this one is a poem for one of my teachers, and probably the reason I've been on this 50-year plus journey. When I was a freshman in college at SUNY Brockport, our freshman comp teacher said, go hear the anti-war poet and write a paper and get extra credit. And I had never written a poem in my life except for a couple bad high school exercises. And I went and heard Robert Bly, and it substantially changed my life. I basically became a poet, translator, and publisher because of his example, because he did all three of those things and many more. Driving country roads, the first flurries of November dance along the pavement. A late night message from a friend tells me you have faded from the fog of these last years, slipping quietly into whatever is next. Robert, you speculated about much, infuriating and bewildering some, but inspiring and enchanting many. Hearing a poem of Yeats in high school, you decided to write poetry the rest of your life. You asked yourself if you had wasted your life sitting indoors writing poems and said, no, I would do it again 1,000 times. Robert, I heard your poems in the translations of Machado in college like you heard Yeats. Those poems made me follow the path of poetry nurtured by those words. And yes, I too would do it again 1,000 times. I'll close with a couple poems. For about 10 years, we lived in Big Sur in the winter, because Buffalo winters can be a little harsh at times. Although with climate change, it's getting warmer, so who knows? And we have a big lake there, so we have plenty of water. Unlike Southwest, we won't run out. But the last section of the book is poems from being in Big Sur. 6 months after the fire's flames left the slopes bare, came record winter rain. Some days howling rain drove sideways, horizontal, soaking the loose granite soil on the steep slopes. The roaring stream below us swelled to 3 times its size, undermining 3 large redwoods, one of which fell into a power pole, the glass transformer sending a shower of sparks into the night, cutting our power. Slopes slid and dirt roads turned into rivers with waterfalls. The night the canyon turned liquid. And the last poem, which is the last poem in the book, which is actually from being at Esalen in the hot tubs which are perched above the Pacific. Beautiful spot. The sea at night is boisterous, then almost silent. A half a dozen random human hearts gradually beat in unison in the slow, steady rhythm immersed in a hot pool on the ragged edge of the continent. A blanket of fog suddenly dissipates, revealing the star book of the sky. We look for those constellations we know, the Big and Little Dipper, Orion's Belt, and wonder about those like Cassiopeia we only know by name. The beauty is this darkness, is how it lets you dissolve into the night. Thank you, and thank all of our poets and readers.
Yes, thank you all for coming. This has just been marvelous. It's been such a treat for me to hear everybody, and I think a really well-deserved tribute to the amazing poet and publisher, Dennis Maloney. Buy some books.
Or now the bookstore and community center.
Yes.